say? I told you they ain't got no love for you, they ain't come up with you. What I say? I told you there wasn't no real niggas, now you gotta deal with them. What I say? I told you she ain't got no love for you, she don't really fuck with you. What I say? I told you take care of your fam, stand on the square, be a man. What I say? I told you they ain't got no love for you, if they ain't come up with you. What I say? I told you there wasn't no real niggas, now you gotta deal with them. What I say? I told you she ain't got no love for you, she don't really fuck with you. What I say? I told you take care of your fam, stand on your square, be a man. A cold world, I know. Time moves fast when you tryna chase a bag, that's facts. At last, niggas finally see your check. Haters wanna knock you off your apex. They mad, cause your bitch ain't loyal. Broke the code, put a price on her soul. Get a hold of your life. You could blow overnight, or you could fuck it all and lose control. Suicide is a suicide, yeah. It's a big difference between you and I. And I'm super straight. They say you 6 million ways to die. Choose your fate. I ain't gonna lose the case. Prove your worth, nigga. Move your weight. Keep your nose clean before you lose your face. What up your face value? We don't know your face. I step up in this bitch like I own the place. I pay close attention to their tone and pace. Is he really built? Will he fall to break? Life is guns and water, baby boy, you straight. And I got it in either hand, I mean I hold your fate. Never know, it could be your time to go today. Who knows, a nigga like me might show you the way. Seal his fate with a kiss from a rose on the grave. I stand on anything I say, what I say. What I say? I told you they ain't got no love for you if they ain't come up with you. What I say? I told you there wasn't no real niggas, now you gotta deal with them. What I say? Mercy, mercy, Lord have mercy. Why niggas hate me? Show me no mercy. Brother forsake me, woman them hurt me. Mercy, mercy, Lord have mercy. Okay, walk like a champion, talk like a champion. You don't hear that semi blow. Put up on your set slow. You don't hear no engine. Put a body on me gun wide. Walk like a champion, talk like a champion. You don't hear that semi blow. Put up on your set slow. You don't hear no engine. Put a body on the gun wide. Mercy, mercy, the wicked have no mercy. So I gotta stay with a blicker, niggas be thirsty. Quicker than the flick of a picture, niggas could murk me. Catch you with your dick in these bitches and do you dirty. But I'm God body, I put that shit on the jersey. No weapon formed against me shall hurt me. Go to war on your turf, I put you under the surface. Mac 10s, Mac 11s, call a nigga Bernie. Open up the chest of a nigga, them bitches burning. Living by the scripture that's written in this discernment. I see that window closing, can't be playing in the curtains. I ain't playing like the circus, I'm a man with a purpose. Can't be laying with the serpents, keep the squares out your circle. You ain't standing on your word, what kind of man are you? X you out, cross you over, I had to shell guide you. Can't stop a nigga drive the beat, they can't guard you. Hell have no fury compared to what God do. I'm a whole gangster, my nigga not partial. 38 special, this nigga think he's special. I go ahead depart you, I ain't finna argue. Walk like a champion, talk like a champion. You don't hear that semi blow. Pull up on your set slow. You don't hear no engine. Put a body on the gun wide. Walk like a champion, talk like a champion. You don't hear that semi blow. Pull up on your set slow. You don't hear no engine. Put a body on the gun wide. Nigga, all that shit you saying ain't felt. I don't take you as serious as you take yourself. Niggas steady playing, better play where it's safe. Never know who I'm locked in with around your way. I don't like no bad energy around my space. The label good green, nigga, what's good, you straight. Niggas talking crazy, that's a big mistake. Dreadlock driller met his twisted fate. Had to spin that nigga around like 360 ways. You don't know how I get out, fully I've been on edge. I can't let that slide, don't be that guy. Red Bull gets you, nah little nigga they lie. This Desert Eagle gives you wings once I let that bitch fly. This Eagle Live vision on this level of mine. Give you an evil eye vision, red beam on the 9. Even I've seen evil eyes still cry. Don't leave an eyewitness on the scene of the crime. Seeing is believing, you ain't seen nothing yet. Switch scenes like the seasons over scene on the set. You think it's sweet cause you breathe until you see what what's next? Okay. Walk like a champion, talk like a champion. You don't hear that semi-glow. Pump, 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 pump. Pull up on your set slow. You don't hear no engine. Put a body on me gun wide. Walk like a champion, talk like a champion. You don't hear that semi-glow. Pump, 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 pump. Pull up on your set slow. You don't hear no engine. Put a body on me gun wide. Walk like a champion, talk like a champion. You don't hear that semi-glow. Pull up on your set slow. You don't hear no engine. Put a body on me gun wide. Mercy, mercy, Lord have mercy. Why niggas hate blow? Show me no mercy. Brother forsake me, woman that hurt me. Mercy, mercy, Lord have mercy.
What's good? What's good? Shalom, shalom. What's cracking? What's cracking? I know you see the title. We back at it. That's right. Back into the book of Ecclesiasticus, you know. Friends, how many of us have the wisdom of Sirach, right? We're gonna get into it, this series that we doing, part of the series, been a minute, been a little bit, we left off, it's called Basic Instructions Becoming Life Eternal, right? We to play off the spelling of the word Bible, I know people traditionally say basic instructions before leaving earth, but when you understand contextually heaven in the Bible, it's going to be on earth, so we ain't going nowhere, right? So yeah, the wisdom books, so this series is, about getting into the wisdom books, as far as like people that's, first, new to the, first time reading the Bible and stuff and wondering where to start at and all that, So, and a good place to start, I believe is, the books of wisdom. Then as you read the books of wisdom, then you can get into the history and the laws and stuff like that, the first 5 books of Moses and whatever. And it will kind of help you better understand the laws, I think, if you can get the spirit and the wisdom behind, the thinking of the Most High, right? So yeah, of course, giving all praises to the Most High God, Yahweh. We do so in His only begotten Son, Yahweh Shai, who the world probably know as Jesus Christ, right? So we're going to get right into it, though, without further interruptions and all that cool stuff. We left off in Ecclesiasticus 4, so we're going to start with 5. Right. So again, we've been bouncing back and forth too between the book of Proverbs and Ecclesiasticus. Then we're gonna get the other and get Ecclesiastes also, and so forth. And all that, right? So yeah, good book to read. A lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge. A lot of understanding, help you deal with everyday life, help you deal with people, help you navigate this wicked world that we live in. So that's why, it's important to understand these books, and and it's always a good starting point, when you just getting into reading the Bible. So yeah, let's start with Ecclesiasticus 5 and 1. Let's start at the Tizah. And it says this. It says, set not thy heart upon thy goods, and say not, I have enough for my life. And, that's a very important scripture that we have to understand. Because a lot of times we put our faith in material stuff and, and think because we have this or have that, that we're, sustained and, we're blessed and everything is cool. But it's telling us, set not thy heart upon thy goods, and say not, I have enough for my life. Right? Because people get prideful. Sometimes people get prideful enough to where they, forget the Most High God and forget His blessings and forget how they got where they got, and they get beside themselves. Right? It's at Revelation 3:17, and it says this: because thou sayest, I am rich and increase with goods, I have need of nothing. Right? So, and that's how a lot of people get pompous in their heart, in their own mind, because they might, what they perceive as success or being prosperous. And so they take it to the heart, take it to the head, and then they forget where their blessings come from. Right? Then they forget that it was the Most High God. Like one of, even though people say it because it sounds cool to say it, but when you think about it and break it down, it's like one of the wickedest statements that we say as a people when we say we got it out the mud, right? And when you're saying you got it out the mud, basically saying I did it myself, it was me, right? And not understanding, we kind of discrediting the Most High blessings in the whole thing, right? So it says, because thou sayest, I am rich and increase with goods, and have need of nothing, and knoweth not that thou art wretched and miserable, and poor and blind and naked. Right? So those people that built themselves up off material stuff, the popularity of the world and people and all that stuff, they are miserable and empty on the inside, right? Because they're filling, themselves up, whatever emptiness they got, they're trying to plug it with, the ways of this world. And it says, because thou sayest, I am rich and increase with goods, and have need of nothing, and know not that thou art wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. Right? And a lot of these people be, horrible people on the inside, miserable people, right? They have a saying where they say, you shouldn't meet your hero, because, a lot of times people have bad experiences when they meet somebody that they look up to, right? Because a lot of those people are wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked, right? So it says, set not thy heart upon thy goods, and say not, I have enough for my life. Right? So don't be that pompous person that, think that you don't need God because, you got money and this and that, and not understanding that, with a freak accident, you can lose all that. And we be forgetting how fragile things are. Right? Think about people that got in a car, just bought a car. People that maybe they wasn't educated enough, they didn't buy a good car, they probably bought a lemon or something. So, they get that car, but then all of a sudden that car only works for a few days and it breaks down on them. But for those few days, they thought they was good, they thought everything was great. Right? So, don't be that person. Right? It says, Proverbs 3:5, trust in the Lord with all thy heart, and lean not unto thy own understanding. Right? And that's what we have to do, lean not unto our own understanding, but in all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy path. Right? And that's what we have to keep in mind, right? Instead of being, arrogant and, thinking that we, do all of this cool and great stuff by ourselves, right? And it's very, very crazy how things go, right? And it says, follow not thy own mind, strength to walk in thy ways of thy heart, right? And that's what a lot of our people suffer from. They follow after their own mind, right? They have a hard time taking counsel from wise people, and they follow after their own mind. A lot of our women folk suffer from this, right? Talking about, can't nobody tell me what to do. Ain't no, man can control me, right? You know, I do what I want, right? And the same women that say that, they're not gonna listen to no man, or a man gotta do this or do that for them to listen to him, or they be in a relationship with a guy, and the guy say, hey, do this or do that, or why you got on this or why you got on that, and she be like, well, I ain't gotta listen to you, right? But the craziest part is every night in my tray from Boys in the Hood, when he put his thing in you, right, you submit, because sex is a physical act, right? And then there's no point in time during sex that a woman's in control. Never ever, 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 never ever, never ever, ever. Okay, so you're getting dominated for the whole 2 minutes, right? So, and that whole time, I mean, and so it's like, well, you being humble. So as you being humble, then after that, you have the audacity to say, you can't tell me what to do. I ain't listening to you. But he done flipped you over, told you to bend it over, grab them ankles, do this and do that, touch this and touch that. But, I mean, when he try to give you some advice, try to tell you, hey, this ain't right, or you shouldn't do that, or I don't trust this, or I don't trust that, it says, and say not, who shall control me for my works? For the Lord will surely revenge thy pride. Right? And that's what happens, they get, like, ain't nobody control me. Right? Like, what did Twister say? She, what she told me? Ain't no motherfucking that can control me. Ain't she Bo G? Right? And that's, the attitude that we have. Instead of having that humbleness, that, softness that we once had amongst each other, it's bitterness. Right? And because it says, set not thy heart upon thy goods, and say not, I have enough for my life. Follow not thy own mind, and thy strength to walk in thy ways of thy heart. Say not, who shall control me for my works? And those works is the things you do. Things you do in your life, right? People say, I do what I want. Ain't nobody can tell me what to do, right? And so, and again, so we lack discipline, and we have a hard time trying to, take instructions, right, from people. And because it says, follow not thy own mind, thy own strength to walk in thy ways of thy own heart, right? And so we don't want to get caught up in our own thinking and not consulting with the Most High God, right? And it says, and say not, who shall control me for my works, right? And again, going back to our women folks, I got to get on them a little bit. You don't want to be, pompous, because, again, doing sexual activities with a man, you are getting dominated the whole time. So then to afterwards be like, well, no, I don't have to listen to no man, that is kind of like half retarded. And because then why even let the man put his penis in you in the first place if you're not willing to, submit and, listen to that guy in the first place, right? Crazy, right? That's why the God says this, because it told us this last part. For the Lord will surely avenge thy pride. And it says this, Isaiah 3:16. It says, moreover, Yahweh said, because the daughters of Zion are haughty, right? Meaning they're arrogant, they're stuck up, and because that's how, like, a lot of our women, even back then, because, they had a sense of arrogance about themselves, sense of stuck-upness, right? And And not saying that, of course, we talking about a special select. We ain't talking about all, right? Because I know some people get sensitive. Oh, he's talking about black women. Right? But it says, moreover, said the Lord, because the daughters of Zion are haughty and walk with stretched forth necks and wanton eyes. Meaning they, always, looking, out to be seen, looking for attention, always in some guy's face, right? And the Most High God is not cool with that, because as an Israelite woman, a black, Hispanic, and Native American woman, you are a princess of the Most High God, whether you like it, believe it, understand it, or not. And being a princess, right, and being of royalty, you are to carry yourself a certain type of way, right? And that is what it says. It says, and walk with a stretched forth neck, right? Walking, women be, some women be, how they be looking sometime, and, and then they be rolling their neck and, having an attitude with it, right? Then it says, and wanton eyes, just looking and, being all up in other men's face. And it says, and walking and mincing as they go, just acting out, doing things for attention, twerking at the red light, and all that cool stuff, right? Dancing on top of cars. It says, and making a tinkling with their feet. Therefore the Lord will smite with a scab the crown of the head of the daughters of Zion. So, and what is the crown of the head? Right? The crown of the head is the top. And it says, the Lord will smite thee with a scab. And you look at a lot of our Judite women, a lot of our Southern Kingdom women, because this is what this prophecy is about. Some of them, have a hard time growing hair. And it goes back to this prophecy right here, because of how our women was. Certain things was going to transpire and take place, and certain punishment that the Most High God, uses to punish, on in certain instances, right? And it says, boom, boom, boom. It says, oops. And it says, moreover, said Yahweh, because the daughters of Zion are haughty and walk with stretched forth necks and wanton eyes, walking and mincing as they go, and making a tinkle with their feet. Therefore, God will smite thee with a scab of the crown of the head of the daughters of Zion, and the Lord will discover thy secret parts. Right? So then, that's why a lot of our women is out being portrayed as they, being portrayed in a whorish fashion, in a over-sexualized fashion, right? And it's looking acceptable. Then a lot of guys is, getting turned off about it and saying like, no, we don't want women like that, And because, again, what it says, and the Lord will discover thy secret parts. So you got women out here and exposing their bodies and stuff, wearing all type of revealing clothes, and again, and then you have guys out here like, nah, we ain't with all that, right? And that's why we see, a lot of this, what they call, what type of, I guess you can call it explicit, not explicit, but, I guess, just, well, shoot, fine, call it how it is. Whoredom style dressing, right? I'm trying to find a nicer word, right? But, that became a style for a lot of people. And then again, it says, in the day of the Lord will take away the bravery of their tinkling ornaments about their feet, their cause, and their round tires like the moon, the chains of the bracelets of the mufflers, and the bonnets, and the ornaments, and the legs, and the headbands, and the tablets, and the earrings. Meaning, He's going to bring these, some of these people that have that type of attitude, he's going to bring them down to a low state, right? And, it's going to bring them down to a low state. And they're not going to be so proud and haughty anymore, right? And, so because the Most High God you got to understand the power of God. He's not a God to be played with, and that Christian church, they teach you that God is someone to be played with. And you don't know what type of way he'll jack you up, right? He has many ways. Back over here, it says, and say not, who shall control me for my works? For the Lord will surely avenge thy pride. Right? Let's get Psalms 9 and 13. And it says, have mercy upon me, O Yahweh, consider my trouble, which I suffer of them that hate me. Thou that lift me up from the gates of death. Right? And it says, I have showed forth all my praise in the gates of the daughters of Zion, and I rejoice in thy salvation. Right? And so you want to oh, that's Psalms. I'm at Proverbs. Oop, that was Psalms. Proverbs 9 and 13. Yeah. So we gotta understand that, right? So again, it says, thou shalt not, let me read this one more time. It says, and say not, who shall control me for my works, right? And because it says over here, Proverbs 9 and 13, that's what I wanted. It says, a foolish woman is clamorous. She is simple and knoweth nothing. Meaning, you have a certain group of women that just, how Dame Dad say, chatty patties, right? And, always gossiping, always starting trouble, always in the mix, right? It says, a foolish woman is clamorous. She's always loud and boisterous and just talking blah, 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 right? And she is simple and knoweth nothing, because she's not speaking with any wisdom or common sense. She's just saying things to, be irritable, right? Then it says, she sitteth in the door of the house on the seat of the high places of the city. Meaning she's out and about. She's always, in a place to be, right? She always on the scene, right? Then it says, to call the passengers to go their way. So she's, always, see her always mingling with the fellas, right? Always up in somebody's face. And it says, who is simple, let him turn hither. For him that is wanting understanding, she said to him. So then you end up falling for this chick. So now the same chick that's out and about, and now you're getting stressed out because you're like, man, who's she talking to? What's she doing? Why she ain't home yet? And such, right? It says, stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant, right? So meaning, this woman can, trick you into, sleeping with her, and although you may have a woman or she may have a man, right? And can, end up seducing you into having, sex with her, because it says stolen water is sweet. Because some people get turned on knowing the fact that they're cheating and it's a possibility that they can get caught, like, oh man, I know he's about to come home soon, but I got to get this one in, right? And so people get, they get caught up in that, because it says stolen waters are sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant, right? So, and people they have little fantasies and stuff like that. The whole R. Kelly and Mr. Biggs. R. Kelly made about 11 songs about him and Mr. Biggs. This is Mr. Biggs, we're doing Mr. Biggs, right? Made all them songs. And it says, but he knoweth not that the dead are there, and her guests are the depths of hell. So meaning dealing with this type of wicked woman can only cause you stress and heartache and heartbreak and a whole bunch of child support and alimony and half of everything else, right? That's the only thing. That's the only outcome with dealing with a woman like that, right? So you gotta understand. It says, "Say not, I have sinned, and what harm have happened to me." So don't be prideful in your works and in your sin. Don't be like, well, shoot, I'm a sinner. I do what I want. Like how people say, once saved, always saved. Like, well, I ask for, I'm a sinner, but I repent and I ask for forgiveness and all that stuff, right? But it says this: "Say not, I have sinned, and what harm have happened to me?" Because people get their false pride and thinking because God haven't punished you speedily, or how T.I. say expeditiously, right? You think everything is cool, right? But it tells us this over here. Hebrews 10:26 says this. It says this, like this, and like that. It says, "For if we sin willfully," right? So meaning if you know you're doing something wrong, right? And you be like, I'm just going to ask God to forgive me later. It's cool, right? Because, that's what Jesus for anyway, right? He came to forgive everybody's sins. So, it's cool. I just ask him for forgiveness, right? But it tells us, "For if we sin willfully, after that we have received the knowledge of the truth." So now after you know the truth, you know what's good and what's bad, right? You know what God expects and what he don't expect, right? You know what you should do and what you should not do. You understand good and well that you should not do what you're going to do, right? You know that. So, if we sin willfully, hold on. They're over here trying to hate on us. Hold up. It says, "For if we sin willfully after we have received the knowledge of the truth, there remaineth no more sacrifice for sin." So what does that mean? That means you can't just be, well, I'm just going to keep asking God for forgiveness for the same old sin I keep committing, right? You say, all right, I'm not going to ever do that again. Then time go by, and you do it again. Then be like, dang, I did it again. Let me ask God for forgiveness. Right? But what it's telling us here, because Christianity tells us you can do that. They say that you can go and sin as much as you want, and then just be like, I'm sorry, right? I'm sorry. It's good, right? And then some time go by, you do it again, right? And then you can be like, you know what? I'm gonna go pray and say, you know what, God, let me go to church Sunday. Matter of fact, I'm gonna go to church. I'm gonna sit in church, and let God see me. He know I went to church. Like you're doing God a favor because you went to church. And don't get me started on that. But anywho, so then you go, but not understanding, it tells us this: "For if we sin willfully after we have received the knowledge of the truth, there remaineth no more sacrifice for sin." Meaning you can't just keep asking God, oh God, can you please forgive me? Please help me. You can't do that. "But a certain fearful look for judgment and fiery indignation which shall devour the adversaries." Okay, that's what you can eventually look for. You keep on doing what the man you do. You go right? And it says, "He that despised Moses' law die without mercy." Okay? But this is New Testament, everybody. Book of Hebrews. This is after the gospel, after the death and the resurrection. And the author of Hebrews is telling us this: "He that despised Moses' law died without mercy." Right? So you have an institution called Christianity, that tells everybody, hey, you don't have to keep God's law, everything is cool, Just believe in Jesus, everybody. We good. But again, we have a problem here because this is after the death and resurrection, right? And they well into their ministry going around teaching, and they are saying this: he that despised Moses' law died without mercy under 2 or 3 witnesses, right? So that's, telling. That means we should be keeping the law, right? So it says, how much sore punishment suppose ye shall he have brought a worthy who have trodden under the foot of the Son of God, and have counted the blood of the covenant, wherewith he was sanctified, a unholy thing, and have done despite unto despite unto the Spirit of grace, right? And that's what people do. They despise the sacrifice of Christ. They despise, the covenant when they take up the mantle and say, well, I'm a sinner. We all fall short of the glory of God, and that's just what it is. And I just pray for forgiveness, right? Christianity teaches a defeated mentality, a defeatist mentality, right? Because Christ told us to be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. We can read through this whole Bible of people that kept the law, right? And to think that we don't have to keep the law, to think that we can just discount the knowledge and history of us being an Israelite. It's this guy. I said his name last time. I ain't gonna put him on blast this time. Psych Fred. Right? This guy. Right? And I was thinking, because we go into we get into what they call regeneration, right? And we understand that, when you die, your spirit goes back to the Father, you get judged, then you come back into this world, and you live out the blessing or punishment that God, subscribed to you, right? We know that. We understand that. And we understand that there are people that are predestined to follow Christ and to be, of the Most High, right? That we understand there are people that are predestined to go against the truth, right? Because in their past life, they went against the truth. So now, this guy, Fred, I put him on blast. Because he be going after the Most High God. So, and we gotta say something. So, this guy is what the Bible would call a leper, right? And so, and not a clean leopard at that, right? A clean leopard would be like full albino person, right? So it is self-evident that some people are rejected by God, right? Because it says, how much sore punishment suppose ye shall he have worthy who have trodden under the foot of the Son of God, and have counted the blood of the covenant, counted this whole holy blood of the covenant, this whole Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob thing to be nothing, right? It says, counted the blood of the covenant wherewith he was sanctified, an unholy thing has done to despite unto the holy and unto the Spirit of grace, right? That's what's going on, because we taught that grace is like, well, just believe in Jesus, everything good now. No. Grace is not that. Grace is when that electric company, that bill company, whoever it may be, gas company, call you and say, hey, you owe this much money. We're going to cut your stuff off. And you be like, hey, can you give me into such and such time to pay? And they be like, yeah, okay, we'll give you to such and such time to pay. That is grace. Because if you don't pay it at that such and such time, they're going to cut your stuff off. So the grace and the mercy is for us to come back to the law, statutes, and commandments, come back to the Most High God, keep the faith, right, in this grace period, right? He's given us an opportunity to get it right, because when he come back, He's laying belt to ass. He's not handing out lollipops and you know and taking everybody to the carnival. He ain't doing none of that, right? He's coming to crush this place and put this whole world into subjugation, except for the special ones, right? So that's what's going on. Back over here. It says, concerning a prohibition, be not without fear to add sin unto sin. And that's what people do. You know, they just so, you know, boisterous, like, yeah, I know I'm a sinner. Shoot, I sin every day. Shoot. And all this stuff, right? And they be boisterous about it, right? You know, and not understanding that, you know, it's crazy. Really crazy. Let's see, hold up. It is, where it at? Let me do it like this. Hold on. Bear with me. Here we go, Isaiah 3 and 9, right? So Isaiah 3 and 9 says this. So again, you know, people be so boisterous and stuff and how they conduct themselves. And, you know, just think it's okay to be a openly sinner, right? When the Bible says this, it says, the show of their countenance do witness against them. So the show of their countenance witness against them. You know, every time they accept their wickedness and pronounce it, instead of, you know, saying, hey, I gotta get rid of this wickedness. I gotta stop this thing that's, you know, ill in me, right? It says, the show of their countenance do witness against them. You know what I mean? You can see it on them, right? I was talking to a sister the other day and was talking about, you know, this evil people, you know, and how that demonic spirit gets on people. And we were speaking about how on our people, whenever we got that demonic evil spirit on us, you can see it in our countenance. Like it just said, the show of their countenance do witness against them. So you can see it in our face, you know, our muscles and stuff be, you know, tensed up, and you can see it in our facial structure. You can see that something ain't right, you know, when something is wrong with us. You be like, man, something ain't right with that person. You know, got to look out, watch them, you know, keep an eye on that person, right? Because that demon, that spirit that sits on the Lord's people, it doesn't fit us quite right. It's like back in the 90s when they used to wear like clothes 3 times too big, you know what I'm saying? You know, so it doesn't fit quite right. It looks crazy, right? And you can see it on us more so than you can see it on the other nations, and chiefly Esau, the white man, right? If Jeffrey Dahmer had a few air fresheners, nobody would have knew what was going on, because all the neighbors like, oh, he's such a nice guy. Oh, he's so quiet. He's such a good gentleman. Oh, he's so nice. All the man needed was a few air fresheners, right? He would have been cool, because nobody looked at him as crazy and deranged, right? Because that spirit sits on them more comfortably, more, you know, fitting, that you won't know that, you know, it's a demonic possession until you turn on the news and find out that 50 people unalive at a movie theater, right? Or at a parade, because they just look normal, you know. But us, it says, the show of their countenance do witness against them. And they declare their sin as Sodom, and they hide it not, right? And that's what our people do. We boastfulness in our wickedness, right? We make music and about how wicked we are, right? And so, and it says they declare it not. It says, woe unto their souls, for they have the reward evil unto themselves, right? Woe unto their souls. Woe unto their souls, for they have rewarded evil unto themselves, right? And that's what we do when we speak, negativity and speak evil out of our mouths. We ward ourselves with evil. You know what I'm saying? You gotta understand our words have power. We gotta, get in the habit of speaking life instead of speaking death, right? And it starts with music, right? And, a lot of times you can, put certain spells and certain energies out by just saying certain things, right? Putting certain things in the ether, right? So you gotta watch what you say and how you say it. It says, back over here, and say not his mercy. Okay, back up here. I'm still at 4. It says, and say not I have sinned, and what harm have happened to me? For the Lord is long suffering; He will in no wise let thee go. So God will punish. Don't think because He haven't jacked you up right then and there, that it ain't coming, right? Because you got to understand, 1 Thessalonians 5:2, even though we use that to talk about, stuff that's going on a political scale, but also in our life, peace and safety. Whenever we think we in peace and safety, then sudden destruction will come, right? And it says, jump down to 6, and say not his mercy is great, he will be pacified. He will be pacified for the multitude of my sins, right? Going back to what we were saying earlier, don't be that person thinking, oh, well, sure, all I gotta do is believe in Jesus. I got baptized and that's cool and all. So that's it, right? Because it says, and say not his mercy is great, because that's what we think. We misuse his mercy. We understand his mercy to be do whatever the hell you want and just ask for forgiveness and say in Jesus' name I pray, amen, right? And we say, yeah, that we good now. We good, right? But that's not what's going on here, because we just we went over the grace and mercy, and like I said, it's just like if you owe a bill and the light company is about to cut your lights off, and you say, hey, can you give me till next week to pay it? And they be like, okay, we'll give you next week to pay it. That week, that 7 days, that's your grace, that's your mercy. You have to get whatever money you supposed to have within that week to pay the light company so they don't shut it off, right? So these 2,000 years that Christ been sitting back and living life, right, been giving us the grace and the mercy for we can get back into the covenant and do what we're supposed to do. Because when he come back, this opportunity we have, to better ourselves and to strengthen ourselves spiritually, to know the Most High God, it's going to come to an end pretty soon. We got to understand that, right? Like it tells us in the book of Daniel, in the last days, knowledge should increase, right? And you should want to get some of that, pause. Should want to, be a part of that, this information boom, right? Although, again, it's good information, bad information. That's why study to show thyself approved, right? So that's what we're talking about. So back over here. It says, boom, boom, boom. But yeah, it says, and say not his mercy is great, but he will pacify for the multitude of my sins. For mercy and wrath come from him. His indignation resetteth upon the sinners. Right? So meaning God is, don't think that he's not going to punish you, because he will get you. And sometimes, a lot of times we so jacked up in our lives sometimes. We don't even know when the Most High God is punishing us. We just look at it like, well, this is my life. Not even understanding that whatever hellish condition you in, it's because, you're going against, your lifestyle is contrary to the Most High God. Right? But we be so endowed and deep into what we're doing, we don't even consider. Right? But it says, make no tarry to turn to Yahweh, and put not from day to day. Right? So don't be like, listening, to this, or, you hear another Israelite teaching and be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's cool and all, but, I don't know if I could do that right now. I've still got this going on, like, I don't know if I can, cause I've been doing this for a long time though, and I don't know if I can just give it up like that. But what it tells us, make no tarry, meaning don't delay, right? Tarry means to wait. But it said, make no tarry to turn to the Lord. So when you hear this information, you should make no tarry, no delay to turn to the Lord, right? And, when you hear the truth, it says, and put not off from day to day. Like, all right, people be like, all right, I'm going to get my life together. You know what I'm saying? I know, like, man, I got to get my life to Christ, but I got to get this money first, man, for real. I got to, I'm out in these streets. I got to get this money, son. Right? So don't put it off, day to day. Don't be like, well, all right, I'm gonna buy some, like, I know I'm supposed to wear fringes. I'm gonna get some fringes. I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna buy some next time. I know I'm supposed to, stop eating, pork and shrimp, crab, and lobster, but, all right, that's the last one, Or I know, I shouldn't be sleeping around with this woman and that woman, and, treating them like, hoes. I'm going to start treating these women as my wives, as my woman, like I want them forever, ever, right? So then you start changing things, right? And because it says, make no tarry to turn to the Lord, and put off from day to day, for suddenly shall the wrath of the Lord come forth, and thy security thou shalt be destroyed. Right? So don't be that guy. Right? Let's get this real quick. Psalms 19. Psalms 119 and 59. And it says, I thought on my ways, and I turned my feet to the testimony. Right? That's what David said. Right? And that's what we got to do as we listen to these breakdowns and, studying, the Bible and all that. We have to do like David when it says, I thought on my ways. Where it at? It says, I thought on my ways. It says, I thought on my ways. I turned my feet to thy testimony. Meaning he didn't, like it says, did not make haste. Because like it says, make no tarry to turn to the Lord. It says, I thought on my ways. I turned my feet to thy testimony. I made haste and delayed not to keep thy commandments. Right? You got to have that spirit like David. Right? God loved David. God said that David was a man after his own heart. So we have to be like David. Because David is saying this. David don't have the Christian understanding of grace and mercy. That, I can just believe in Jesus and everything's straight. He said, I thought on my ways. You have to think on your ways. There ain't no such thing as come as you are and all that stuff. That's crazy, right? You know, you have to change yourself. You have to fix yourself. That's why David said, I thought on my ways. I turned my feet to thy testimony. I made haste and delayed not to keep thy commandments. Gotta have that spirit. You gotta delay not to keep the commandments, because the commandments is what save us, right? Because like it tells us over here, it says this, Psalms 19:7. The law of the Lord is perfect, right? It's perfect, you know, and that's what makes us perfect when we keep the law. The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. Again, like I said, that's what saves us, right? Converting the soul. And it says, the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. Right? That's the power of God, right? You know, so that's why, you know, we have to understand that this whole grace thing is not what we've been taught. You know, what we've been taught is actually getting yourself together so when Christ comes back, it says this. It says, make no tarry to turn to the Lord, and put not off from day to day, for suddenly the wrath of Yahweh will come forth, and in thy security thou shalt be destroyed, right? And perish in the day of vengeance, right? So that's the thing. That's what's going on here. So you want to keep the law, right? And understand that that's, you know, that's the end result of that mercy and grace when it's time to collect. You know, just like when the bill collectors say, hey, do you got my money? You're like, no, I don't got your money. And they're like, well, we're going to cut your stuff off, right? Then they cut it off. So if you ain't keeping the law, statutes, and commandments in the faith, it says, in thy security thou shalt be destroyed and perish in the day of vengeance, right? So that's what's going on. Verse 8, set not thy heart upon goods unjustly. You know, meaning don't be out here robbing and stealing and trying to come up that way and thinking you're going to prosper. Because, you know, we make this mistake of trying to live like Esau. You know, we watch their movies. We see how, you know, the Gambino family, the Godfather and all them people. We see how, you know, they started a criminal enterprise and became successful. You know, we look at history of the people that jumped off the Mayflower and all that stuff, came over here with criminal minds, criminal intentions, and made this place called America, right? So then we were like, well, maybe we can, you know, go and be thieves and murderers and wicked people. And, you know, perhaps we can get some of this richer stuff, right? That's what we be thinking. But it says, set not thy heart upon goods unjustly, unjustly gotten, for they shall not profit thee in the day of calamity, right? And that's what we got to understand. We be trying to think, you know, we wonder why, you know, sometimes, you know, it seems like this bad luck seems to follow, right? Because people move and operate in certain types of ways, certain type of vibrations, right? And bad will follow. For they shall not profit, for they shall not profit thee in the day of the calamity. Winning now, not with the every wind, and go not into every way. For so doeth the sinner that have a double tongue. So don't be a phony friend. Right, that's what this basically saying. Don't be a friend that is, you know, phony. Like, it's not trustworthy. You know, like, you go hang out with this person, you talking, you know, trash about somebody else. Then you go hang out with that person, then you talking about that person. You're just being messy. You know, just starting trouble. Right? It says, be steadfast in thy understanding, and let thy word be the same. So, like I said, so be a good friend to all your friends. Don't be phony. Don't be that person that act different when they're around certain people. We know certain people like that. You know, we all know somebody that when they get around somebody else, they just change. You know, like, and people like that let you know how they feel about you, right? You know, so you get around this whole person, your whole personality change, your whole everything is just, you know. So that's not a good friend. That's what the, you know, our dear brother Sirach is telling us, right? He says, let's read it again. It says, win now not with every wind, and go not every way, for do for so doeth the sinner that have a double tongue. Right? So like I said, when you read this in a different translation, and speaking of being a good friend, then it says, be steadfast in thy understanding, and let thy words be the same. And don't be phony with your friend. Don't be saying one thing to them, then go behind their back and say another thing. Right? And it says, be swift to hear, and let thy life be sincere. Right? So, you know, be a good listener. Don't be a person that's always trying to overtalk people and, you know, just always got to have something to say and don't listen, don't comprehend. You know, a lot of arguments, a lot of fights happen because of lack of comprehension, lack of understanding. Then the unwillingness to untangle the misunderstanding, to kind of iron things out to for everybody can have a clear understanding. So then people are not willing to, you know, do that. Then you end up in a lot of arguing, a lot of emotions flaring, and people end up, you know, then it sometimes get violent, right? So it's telling us, be swift to hear, and let thy life be sincere. So then be a good person, be a sincere person, be somebody that, you know, somebody can trust, you know, somebody that can, you know, that have a good name, somebody that people can rely on. It says, and with patience, and says, be swift to hear, and let thy life be sincere, and with patience give answer. Right? So, and because you're paying attention and understanding and comprehending what the person is saying to you, then you're able to give an adequate and a intelligent answer to what the person is saying. Versus some people, when they having arguments or discussions and stuff, they're more so just trying to be, you know, just irritate the person and just say things that can throw the person off, and they're not looking for a real, you know, meet in the middle. It's just more so, you know, I'm right, you're wrong, and I don't really have no real proof to why I'm right and you're wrong, so I'm just going to be loud and ignorant, right? So don't be that person. It says, be swift to hear, and let thy life be sincere, and with patience and give an answer. So that way you can give an intelligent, coherent answer to someone that you're speaking with. And it won't, you know, then you won't have misunderstandings, and you won't have, you know, hang-ups, or, you know, and, you know, and you can speak, you know, with wisdom, right? Because you got to understand, like, you delivering a message or you saying a statement, and if that person misunderstands what you're saying, or if there's a misunderstanding, you have to check the message first. You have to check, you know, because sometimes people get, you know, so offended that they're not being understood or heard, and they just snap out on a person. But first thing, you have to make sure that as the messenger, that the message was clear, and it's clear enough as it's going out. Then if there's a misunderstanding, then perhaps the message that you were saying, the statement, whatever, I'm just saying message just to encompass everything. You have to make sure that, you know, maybe perhaps it was not as clear as you thought it was, then reset. Because that's how you can revert from an argument or disagreement, by recognizing, well, hold on, maybe I didn't say it as clear as I thought I did. That's why we're having this misunderstanding, right? So then you repackage it, right? To try to get a clearer and better, you know, understanding. So it says, if thou hast understanding, answer thy neighbor. If not, lay thy hand upon thy mouth. So just don't say anything just to say something. You know, if you don't know, say you don't know. You know, it's not. It's okay if you don't know stuff. You know, this is a whole big wide world. It's a lot of stuff that a lot of people don't know. There's a lot of stuff I know. A lot of stuff I don't know. Right. So, and people can't be, you know, prideful on that type of stuff. You know, right? Because sometimes people just want to always sound smart, sound like they know something, so they want to give a answer, you know. Because once you start off by saying, I don't know, or I'm not sure, you know, then anything after that is just speculative. Because you're not actually speaking from facts, you're just speaking on what you would like or what you would think, right? So, now, all those could be good thought exercises, but when somebody's looking for the truth, then if your first set of words is going to be, I think, or I'm not sure, then you just might want to chill on that subject. Be like, you know, I just don't know, right? So, it says this. Says honor and shame is in talk, and the tongue of a man is his fall. You know, because sometimes people, you can, you know, a lot of people lost their careers, you know, over stuff they said, you know, at the wrong time, you know, or, you know, not saying season, you know, words at the in season, right? You know, and it says, shame and honor is in talk, right? Because the way somebody speak, you know, the words they use, you can tell if they're a dignified person or if they're an ignorant person. You know, they ain't got no sense or whatever, right? And, you know, you can tell, right? And it says, the honor and shame is in the talk. Because the conversations of people, you know, what they like to talk about, you know, what their conversation is like, you know, let you know, like, what be on their mind. You know, they like to talk about gossip and drama all the time. And, I mean, that's, you know, pretty much, you know, what's on their heart, right? And so it says, honor and shame is in the talk, and the tongue of a man is his fall, right? Because, again, depending on what you say, you know, it can lift you up or it can bring you down, right? It says, be not called a whisperer, and a lie not in wait with thy tongue, for a foul shame is upon the thief. Right? So it says, be not called a whisperer. You know, don't be a gossiper. Don't be someone that's always talking about somebody behind their back, you know. You know, especially as a man, you know, that's kind of feminine behavior to do such a thing. You know, always whispering and talking about somebody behind their back. Don't be that. Right? It says, be not called a whisperer, and lie not in wait with thy tongue. Right? So don't be, you know, just sitting and waiting to try to say something bad about somebody. You know, always got something negative, you know, to say. You know, just that one person that they can't never really give a good compliment without, you know, sounding like they hating at the same time. Right? For a foul shame is upon the thief, and an evil condemnation upon the double tongue. Right? So again, you know, being a not such a good friend, you know, being someone that's a backstabber, they smile in your face, right? Being that type of person, right? Being in somebody's face, and then all the time you just talking about them and trying to, you know, usurp them and trying to, you know, you actually working behind them, you know, but you trying to act like everything is cool, right? Don't be that person, you know, a phony friend, you know, like, you know, two-face it, right? It says, be not called a whisperer, and lie not in the weight of thy tongue, for the foul shame is upon the thief, and evil condemnation upon the double tongue. So again, don't be you know, somebody that, like, man, dang, don't tell them anything, because they gonna go and tell it. You know, don't have that reputation about yourself that people think, but no, don't tell no nothing important to that person, because they gonna go tell it, and they gonna spread it, and they gonna be gossiping about it, right? Gonna have your business all out in the streets, right? Don't be that person. When people think of you, that's who they think of. Like, oh no, that person, you know, have your business all in the street, right? It says, be not ignorant of anything in a great matter or small, right? So we gotta, you know, educate ourselves on all things, you know, especially in these end times, you know, because like how it tells us, like I referenced earlier in the book of Daniel, about knowledge shall increase, right, in the last days. So we have to, you know, be circumvent and watch the global news, watch certain things, watch, you know, world history, global politics and stuff like that, you know, or anything, right? And see what's going on, right? Because it tells us, be not ignorant of anything in a great matter or small. So, you know, so some people, like me, I take pride in knowing a little about a lot, right? I remember one time I was in school, you know, I was at a parents and, you know, little teacher conference thing. And the teacher, you know, telling my mom, you know, giving me a compliment. She's like, yeah, you know, like, one thing about your son, you know, no matter what we're talking about, he's always able to add to the conversation. You know, he got a good, you know, overall understanding of a lot of different topics. So as a little kid, when I heard that, that just influenced me more to just study different things. You know, always just look at different stuff, always. Even if I, you know, so gotta get into the habit, because it says, be not ignorant of anything in a great matter or small, right? This is Corinthians 6:2. So we gotta understand why this is important. It says, our dear brother Peter or Paul told us this. It says, do ye not know that the saints should judge the world, right? We are the saints, right? In case you don't know it, like it, understand it, believe it, we are who we say we are, right? And we are the saints of the Most High God, right? Let's prove that really, really quick if I could. If I could. I think it's over. Right here, Psalms 50 and 5. It says, gather my saints together unto me, those that I have made a covenant with me by sacrifice. So who made a covenant with the God of Israel by sacrifice? Who was that? It was the Israelites, right? So it says, gather my saints together unto me, those who have made a covenant with me. Who made a covenant with them? The Israelites. And how did they make that covenant? By sacrifice. How did they sacrifice? With the circumcision, right? So, do ye not know that the saints should judge the world? We are the Israelites, Black, Hispanic, Native American people. We are the gods of this earth. We are the judges of this earth, right? We are the rightful rulers of this planet. Whether you like it, believe it, understand it or not. And we are going to set this world back straight. We are going to get rid of all the wicked evilness, all the destruction, all the war, all the crazy stuff that we see when we turn on the news. We are going to get rid of that, right? Better believe it. Because it says, do you not know that the saints should judge the world? And if the world should be judged by you, are ye unworthy to judge the smallest matters? Right? So, like I said, so always be, you know, circumvent and watch stuff. You know, you might see stuff going on in the music industry, you know, that seem a little off, you know, or whatever, right? You know, so keep your mind open. You keep your eyes open, right? And be not ignorant of anything in a great matter or small, right? So that's what's going on. Chapter 6 of Ecclesiasticus. Let's go to chapter 6. And it says, instead of a friend, become not a enemy, for thereby shalt thou inherit a ill name, shame and reproach, even so a sinner that have a double tongue. So again, do not be, a phony friend. Be a good friend, someone that, can be reliable, and you're not, gossiping and doing hurtful things, behind your friend's back, right? And because the Bible tells us that there's a love of a friend that's closer than a brother, right? And that's the type of love we supposed to have, that type of friendship we supposed to have when you have a friendship. It says, be of the same, this is Romans 12 and 16. Be of the same mind one towards another. Mind not high things, but consent unto men of low estate, and be not wise in your own conceit. Right? So again, it says, be of the same mind one towards another, meaning, treat one another right, be correctly, have the, because if we both understand that we need to keep the commandments of God, then we have the same mind, right? And if we're keeping the commandments of God, then we know that there's certain ways that we ought to treat each other, right? So it says, be of the same mind towards another, mind not the high things. So meaning, don't get so caught up in these difficult things that may divide us and stuff like that. Because sometimes we want to talk about some hard stuff. You be chilling with your you be chilling, then, especially, we know how it is, especially if you're a guy, you understand this. You be chilling, having a good time. Then your lady be like, hey, babe, can I ask you something? It'd be a good time. Like, hey, since you in a good mood, can I ask you something? Then they ask a question that messes up the whole move, right? Don't be that person. It says, don't mind, mind not the high things, so don't get into stuff that's divisive, that can, divide you from your brother, your sister, right? Focus on the things that can keep us, together. And that's keeping the commandments, right? Then it says, mind not the high things, but condescend to men, condescend to men of low estate. Be not wise in your own conceit. So don't be puffed up of your knowledge that you may have, or you may perceive to have, and you think you're better than anybody, right? So don't have that type of mindset, right? Because we learn every day. Everybody learn. We should be learning every day, really, right? So you can't be puffed up in your knowledge. And it says, and it say, exalt not thyself in the counsel of thy own heart, that thy soul will be not torn in pieces as a bull straying along. Right? So don't, be like, like I say, don't be so, I'm so smart and nobody can't tell me nothing, and and that, don't be to the point where you don't have the capacity to receive new information, because you done filled yourself up with all this self-righteousness stuff, and you think you know it all, and nobody can't tell you nothing, right? So that's why it tells us this in Proverbs. Proverbs 26 and 12. Seest thou a man wise in his own deceit? Right? If you see a person wise in their own deceit, meaning you can't tell them nothing, right? It's like you be driving, your person be driving, and you be like, hey, you missed the turn right there. Like, I know where I'm going, goddammit, I know where I'm going. You ain't gonna tell me now, I know this thing a million times, right? Then you end up being lost and running out of gas and stranded, right? It says, seest a man in his own deceit. Seest thou a man in his own deceit? So you can see a person that's just dumb, just foolish, like they ignoring all the warning signs, and you like, this man is just an educated fool, right? We say that sometimes to people. Be like, This is an educated fool, right? Seest thou a man in his own deceit? There is more hope for a fool than of him, right? Because at least a foolish person can be taught. At least you can talk to somebody that don't know no better, and they can probably think on it and be like, all right, okay, maybe I was tripping. Okay, I get it now. But somebody that is wise in their own deceit, somebody that is wise in their own foolishness, you can't tell them nothing. It's like talking to a brick wall. Those type of people have to make those mistakes themselves. They have to make those things. You can't stop them. There's nothing you can do because they're going to do it anyway. You just have to sit back and let them bump their head against the wall and hope one day that the Most High God will, show them their errors, right? It says, see not thou a man wise in his own eyes? There be more hope for a fool than for him, right? You gotta understand that, right? There's more hope for a fool than somebody that's just think they know it all and can't be taught, because a lot of people have an arrogance where they just don't want to be taught, because they think they know something. Isaiah 5:21 says this: woe unto them that are wise in their own eyes, right? So you have people that be like, just think they're just wise in their own eyes. They just, the Bible says, again, it says, woe unto them that are wise in their own eyes and prudent in their sight. So, you have your own righteousness. You have your own set of rules in that you think that you're wise and you just know it all knowing person, right? And people get fooled with their false sense of education, their false sense of importance, because they might get a few letters by their name. Maybe they get a certificate, a diploma, or whatever the case may be. And so they think they know something. But it says, woe unto them that are wise in their own eyes, right? And that's, that's the thing, destruction unto them. That's what it's saying. That are wise in their own eyes and prudent in their own sight. Just thinking that everything they're doing is airtight. Can't tell me nothing. Like what you gonna tell me, right? I'm successful at doing this, right? So they get a false sense of knowing it all, right? It says, woe to them that are wise in their own eyes, right? Where we at? Boom, boom, boom. And it says, thou shalt eat up the leaves and loose thy fruit and leave thyself as a dry tree. So again, so just being a bad person that's not able to produce any fruit and be a benefit to anybody, you just, if anything, you just, a burden or a hazard, right? So it says, thou eat up thy leaves and loose thy fruit and leave thyself a dry tree. So you just, no common sense, no wherewithal, right? No wisdom, right? Just swindle and spoil all the good things that you possibly can get, right? And it says, a wicked soul shall destroy him that has it, and shall make him be laughed to scorn of his enemy, right? So again, just talking about being, just not a good person to other people, and just being wicked and deceitful and conniving and not trustworthy amongst the brethren. Then it says, and those are the type of people that you want to stay away from, that type of friendship, those type of dealings and how people move and act. Because a lot of times we see red flags and stuff, but we don't sometimes we just get caught up in giving people different chances and all that stuff instead of seeing people for what they are, right? And it says Says boom, boom, boom. Says a wicked soul shall destroy him that has it, and shall make him be a laugh to scorn of his enemies. Right? So then it says, sweet language will multiply friends, and a fair speaking tongue will increase kind greetings. So you want to speak with, you know, speak, in a way that can bring people together and all that stuff, right? And then it says, boom, boom, boom. It says, be in peace with many, nevertheless have but one counselor of 1,000. Right? So, and that's the thing, because a lot of times we get caught up taking advice from everybody, and then we getting twisted and doing this thing what this person told us to do, then do that what this person said to do, and hold up. Find this real quick. But find this real quick. Hold up. Let's see. Hold on. Let's find this one first. And bear with me. I think it's a hold up. Let's see, 1 second. Bear with me. Okay. I can't find it, but anyway. So it says but yeah, it says be in peace with many, nevertheless have but one counselor of 1,000. So yeah, you want to have, although you may talk to many people, but don't be that person that try to get advice from this person and that person and this person and that person, and try to mix everything together, make one little concoction, right? And even with this truth, when you're dealing with this truth, right? A lot of times we want to, pick and choose and stuff like that. You pick a position and you stand on it, right? And then may the Lord be with you, right? And again, so you gotta, like I said, it says, where that? Says, be in peace with many, nevertheless have but one counselor of 1,000. So again, don't be running your mouth to everybody, telling your business, putting it out in the streets and all that stuff. But let's have that one person that you can talk to, right? It says, if thou would get a friend, prove him first. So if you get a friend, prove that person first. Make sure this person is a friend, because some people are friendly. It doesn't mean that they are friends. Again, because let me see if I can find it real quick. Hold on one quick. Okay, right here. So, Proverbs 18 and 24. Right. So let's read this one more time. Right. It says, if thou wouldest get a friend, prove him first, and be not hasty to credit him. Right? So, because some people, I know some people be like, no, yeah, that's my best friend. They only knew each other for a few months. Like, yeah, that's my best friend. Like, oh, yeah, we friends. Right? Only knew each other for a few days. Right? Or just met the person today. And be like, yeah, that's my friend. But I tell you, it says, boom, boom, boom. So if thou would get a friend, prove him first, and be not haste to credit him. Right? And it says, Proverbs 18 and 24, a man that find a man that has friends. It says, hold up. And why are you trying to do me like that? Hold on. 18 and 24. Phone jumping. So it says, a man that has friends must show himself friendly. So, a man that has friends must show himself friendly, right? Be a good person, friendly person, someone that is enjoyable to be around, right? It says, and there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. That's what I was saying earlier, that's what type of friend that you should want around you. Someone that is thicker and closer than a brother. We got that saying that we say, blood thicker than water, but only in certain cases, right? So, you have sometimes you have people that's outside of your bloodline that will, can be actually, more, act more as a family than more so as just a friend, right? Because it tells us that a man that has friends must show himself friendly, and there is a friend that's sticketh closer than a brother, right? So, that friend, you could be in the middle of the night in the bed, your friend call you up like, hey, I need you, and you don't ask no questions, you hop up and you go, right? That's the friend that's closer than a brother. You know what I'm saying? That friend that you can call and be like, hey, I got this going on, right? No matter what it is, and they drop it and they go and come and see what's happening, right? That's that type of friend that's closer than a brother, right? And that's what, that's how we should judge friendships, right? Is this person, closer than a brother, right? Just like a brother or a sister, right? Back over here. It says, for some men is a friend for his own occasion. So, some people will be your friend just because it's beneficial for them, at that moment. Maybe you got something they like, or you have access that they need, or whatever the case may be. So they'll be your friend for a while until they can get what they want. He says, for some men is a friend for his own occasion, right? So you have to, watch out for that, So, because some people just want to hang around you for their own reason, their own, ambitions that they have. And it says, for some man is a friend for his own occasion and will not abide in the day of thy trouble. So they only around because, maybe you're a fun person to be around, you're the party person, everybody, but then maybe one day your funds get low. You ain't got that, big house no more. You ain't got that fancy car no more. You ain't got that nice job no more. You ain't got that pretty woman no more. So then those friends start to go away because you ain't got that stuff no more, right? So then it tells you that, what it say? It says, for some is a friend for his own occasion and will not abide in the day of thy trouble. So then you go through some heartaches in your life. You're going through trouble. Then you can't, those same friends that was, getting high with you, drinking with you, partying with you, going out with you, riding in your car, with you, they're nowhere to be found when you're going through stuff, right? Because it says, some man is a friend for his own occasion and will not abide in the day of thy trouble. There is a friend who is being turned to empathy and to turn to enmity and strife will discover thy reproach. So then you have friends that secretly be hating on you. They just always have negative stuff to say to you. They try to pass it off like they just trying to help or give you advice, but they really just being rude and mean and nasty and vindictive, right? But that's how they pass it off. And they say, there's a friend who's being turned into enmity and strife and will discover thy reproach. So what that means is, when you do start going to hard times in your life, that friend is going to be the one that goes and gossip and tell everybody else, hey, this person just got kicked out. Hey, this person just lost their job. Hey, this person going through a divorce. Hey, this person is doing this. This person broke. This person don't take care of their kids, right? So they put your business out, right? So, and it says, there is a friend who being turned to empathy and strife will discover thy reproach. So that's what they do. So then when they see you going through some bad times, instead of helping you, they talk about you. They get out in the streets and they talk about you, right? And it says, again, some friend is a companion at the table and will not continue in a day of thy affliction. So then you go out to eat every day. Y'all go hang out. Y'all go to these restaurants and parties and stuff. Then you're no longer able to pay the bill. You can't cover your half of the meal no more. You can't, afford to go to the club like that no more, right? So then your friends start seeing the drop off. Like, you like, no, I ain't got it. So then instead of them picking you up, like, it's cool, don't worry about it. We got you, right? You know what I'm saying? CMB, that's all we got. But it says, again, some friend is a companion at the table and will not continue in the day of thy affliction. So then some people seem like they rolling with you, they sit with you, they be with you all the time. But then as soon as that roller coaster, start riding high, then they hop off and they get off. And they start rolling with you. They turn into Trey on Boys in the Hood. Hey, Doe, let me out. Right? They ain't gonna ride with you all the way. And it says, But thy prosperity will be as thyself, and will be bold over thy servants. And thou shalt be brought low, and will be against thee, and will hide thyself from thy face. Separate thyself from thy enemy, and take heed of thy friends. So that's what we have to do, separate ourselves from our enemies, and take heed of our friends, right? And that's what we got to do. We got to recognize who is really in our corner, who is our friend, and who is just trying to pretend, right? Like a Pimp C lyric, right? Pimp C said, he's like, what'd he say? I stopped smoking with haters back in 94. But sometimes I just don't know no more. So I forgot how it went though. But he said, basically said he stopped hanging out with haters in 94. So we gotta have a Pimp C mindset. You gotta stop hanging out with haters, right? Because that's what he said. So I stopped hanging out with haters in 94, right? But, so it says, separate thyself from thy enemy. And that's what we have to do. We have to make sure, mark who is with us and who is against us, right? Separate ourselves from our enemies and take heed of thy friends, right? And that's what we do. We take heed of our friends. We, appreciate our friends. We celebrate our friends because, again, like the Bible says, there's a love of a friend that's closer than a brother, right? So you gotta understand that. And it says, So separate thyself from thy enemy and take heed of thy friends. And that's again too on the flip side. We have to separate ourselves from thy enemy, which is these people that currently running this whole thing, right? And a lot of us, we want to make friendships and marriages and be all cool with it, and then wonder why we're going through what we're going through, because we have not separate thyself from thy enemy and take heed of our friends, because that's all we got. Black, Hispanic, and Native American people, that's all we got is ourselves, right? And the rest of the world, whether you like it, believe it, understand it or not, is against us. So we have to separate ourselves from our enemies, which is Esau over here in these Americas, right? Then take heed of our friends. It says, a faithful friend is strong defense, and he have that found such one, and he that found such one have found treasure. So yeah, when you have you a good friend in your corner, someone that's you can always depend on, it's like finding treasure. It's like finding good treasure, and you want to hold on to it and keep it, right? Then it says, nothing do of a countervail a faithful friend, as his excellency is invaluable, right? So a good friend is invaluable. There's no price you can put on a good friend, because what did Christ tell us? No greater love than a friend that's willing to lay down his life for you, right? And we just read also that, there's a relationship between a friend that can be sometimes closer than a brother, right? And so we got to understand the importance of friendship and how to, choose in the right, friendship and how to maintain them, right? And it says, nothing do a countervail a faithful friend, and his excellency is invaluable. A faithful friend is medicine of life. Whoso feareth Yahweh shall direct his friendship aright, for he is, so shall his neighbor also be. You know how they say birds of a feather flock together, right? And it says a faithful friend is medicine of life. So you have a good friend that can be there with you when you're going through some hard times, that can laugh with you, cry with you. You know what I'm saying? That's can be medicine for life, because you're building these long-lasting memories and stuff like that. That bond people together, right? And it says, my son gathered instruction for thy youth. My son gathered instruction from thy youth up. So thou find wisdom till in thy old age. So meaning, don't be a foolish person. Don't be an old fool. Don't be just living life like everything is a music video. Get wisdom as you live. Learn how the old folks used to say, put some fat on your head, right? And just don't be a old fool out here. You want to grow and expand in your wisdom and knowledge. And it says, coming to her as one that is proud and slow and sowed, and wait for her good fruit, for thou shalt not toil much and labor about it, but thou shalt eat of her fruit right soon. So when you spend your life, not being a damn fool, you learning from your mistakes, you gaining knowledge and wisdom, then when you get to your old age, you can you have the wisdom and knowledge and the wisdom keys to navigate, then perhaps share to the younger generation, so they can also get through this wicked world that we live in. She is very unpleasant to the unlearned. He that is without understanding would not remain with her. So people that's just ignorant and just don't understand, when you try to share wisdom and knowledge with them, it's not pleasant to them. It sounds dumb, it sounds lame, it's confusing, or whatever, all the words they like to say, right? Because they can't comprehend it. It says, she is very unpleasant to the unlearned. He that is without understanding would not remain with her. So it's like you can try to, teach somebody, and if they just, unlearn and not willing to expand their horizon and accept new information and perhaps understand that maybe they don't know it all, right? Then, it says, she is very unpleasant to learn, to the unlearned. He that is without understanding will not remain with her. She will lie upon him as a mighty stone of trial, and he will cast her off from him ere it be it long. So, meaning, how they say go in one ear and out the other. You can tell somebody stuff, then, you can be there with them. So then they doing what you, expect of them. Then as soon as you take that watchful eye off of them, soon that, that supervision is gone, then they right back to who they once were, right? And it says, she will lie upon him as a mighty stone of trial, and he will cast her from him, ere as it be long. For wisdom is according to her name, and she is not manifested unto many. So, and that's important because a lot of people think they're wise, but it says wisdom is according to her name, and she is not manifested unto many, right? Because you have to seek knowledge and wisdom, right? It just don't come to you. It says, give ear, my son, receive my advice, and refuse not my counsel. And put thy feet unto her feather, and thy neck unto her chain. So meaning, lock in with this wisdom, lock in with this truth and knowledge of Yahweh, right? You gotta be locked in with it. It says, bow down thy shoulder and bear and bear her, and be not grieved with her bonds. So, then as you learning and you getting this wisdom and knowledge, and it could be grievous, to some, because then you have to change your life. You have to change what you're doing and stuff like that. You might lose friendships. You might lose different relationships. So, and it's telling you that it says, bow down thy shoulder and bear her, and be not grieved with her bonds. Meaning, don't, get overwhelmed and grieved because of the lifestyle changes that you may have to make. That, like we read earlier, David said, I made haste and turned my foot to thy testimony, right? I made haste to keep thy testimony. It says, come into her with thy whole heart, and keep her ways all thy power. Search and seek, and she shall be made known unto thee. So again, you have to search for wisdom and knowledge. It's not going to just come to you. And you search for that wisdom and knowledge by keeping the commandments, because it says, he that fears the Lord, the beginning of knowledge is the fear of the Most High God. And that fear is talking about having that healthy respect, for the Most High God, knowing that he controls this whole big blue thing that we on. And he can, just like that, destroy this whole big blue thing. He can, just like that, to any one of our lives. So, gotta have that healthy respect, that healthy fear, right? That's the beginning of knowledge. And it says, come into her with thy whole heart, and keep her ways with all thy power. Search and seek, and she shall be made unto thee. And when thou hast got hold of her, let her not go. So once you get this truth, you keep it, you hold it, you hold it. This little light of mine, right? You keep it, right? And it says, for at the last thou shalt find her rest, and she'll be turned into thy joy. And that's what's going on. You want that peace, that rest. How they say, Yahweh Shai is the Lord of the Sabbath, and we rest in Christ, right? So you get that rest, right? And you get that rest by, what it say? It says, bow down thy shoulder and hear her, and bear her, and be not grieved with her bonds. Come unto her with thy whole heart, and keep her ways with all thy power. Search and seek, she shall be made known unto thee. And when thou hast gotten hold of her, let her not go. For at the last thou shalt find her. At the last thou shalt find her, find her rest, and that it shall turn to thy joy. So again, keeping these commandments, and finding the simplicity in Christ, right? Because He tells us that my way is easy, right? We get that rest. We get that, that that rest that we all longing for. It says, boom, boom, boom. It says, and then her feathers go strong. Then her feathers go a strong defense for thee, and her chains a robe of glory, right? So, and that's the thing, and her feathers will become a strong defense. So when we read the other verse, it says to what it say? Just go back up. Hold on. Where that? Right here, 24 says, and put thy feet unto her feathers, and thy neck into her chain. So now, like I was saying, it's supposed to be locked in, right? And that's the you lock in, to into this knowledge, into this truth. And it says, then her feathers be strong defense for thee. This is verse 29. Then her feathers be a strong defense for thee, her chain a robe of glory, right? And like I said, to be a strong defense, because you have that knowledge and wisdom, how to fight, right? It says, then shall her feathers be strong defense for thee, and her chain and the glory, right? So hold on. Let's get this real quick. Let's see. Do it like this. It shall be our stability. So it's Isaiah 33:6, right? And it says, and wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times, right? Because this knowledge and wisdom is going to keep us stable, keep us, with our foot down, and we won't be running around like a chicken with his head cut off when all hell is breaking loose in your life or in society, right? Because, like it just said over here, it says, then her feathers should be strong defense for thee, and her chain a robe of glory, right? Because it says, in wisdom and knowledge should be the stability of thy times, and strength of salvation. The fear of the Lord is his treasure, right? So that's what we're talking about. So keeping the commandments, keeping the faith and all that stuff, that the knowledge and the wisdom that the Most High God has given us, and understanding his plan, that's going to keep us stable. When we see all hell breaking loose, we won't be tripping and be like, oh man, what the heck is going on? Because we got the playbook right here, right? And long as we keep the faith and the wisdom and knowledge, it says, wisdom and knowledge should be the stability of thy times, and strength of salvation. The fear of the Lord is thy treasure, right? So that's what's going on over here, right? So back over here, verse 30. It says, for there are golden ornaments upon her, and her bands are purple. Thou shalt put her as a robe of honor, and shall put her about thee, as a crown of joy. So this talking about this, the wisdom of God, the truth, this knowledge, the commandments, right? And it says, it should be above all, and for, it should be the main thing that we, the fourth, in the fourth front of our lives and the things that we do, right? And keeping these commandments. And it says, my son, if thou wilt not, my son, if thou will, thou should be, my son, if thou will, thou should be taught. And if thou would apply thy mind, thou should be prudent. Right? So study to show thyself approved, so we can keep this wisdom and knowledge. So, like it said in Isaiah, it will be our stability in these times. Right? It says, and if thou love to hear, thou should receive understanding. And if thou bow thy ear, thou should be wise. So always be willing to listen. Don't be a know-it-all. Don't think that you don't have to. Nobody can't tell you anything, because you're just a smart person for whatever reason you may give yourself. So don't be that person where you just think nobody can't tell me anything, right? It says, stand in the multitude of the elders and cleave unto him that is wise. So, you see somebody that is wise, don't be ashamed to like ask questions and learn from that person and get some knowledge from them, right? A lot of times we see somebody, instead of trying to learn from them, we get envy of them, like, oh, well, shoot, I know stuff too. Who that person think they is. I know a little bit of too. Instead of just sharing wisdom, sharing knowledge, learning from somebody that, know a little something, right? There's nothing wrong with that, right? And it says, stand in the multitude of the elders and cleave unto him that is wise. Be willing to hear every godly discourse. And that's the thing, we have to be willing to hear every godly discourse, right? Because a lot of times we get caught up in, crazy mess, right? But it says, be willing to hear every godly discourse, and let not the parables of understanding escape thee. So, don't, let the deep sayings and stuff that people may say, escape thee. Get in tune with it. Get, and plant it into your brain when you involve in these different conversations, or, privileged enough to, to hear these conversations. And it says, and if thou seest a man of understanding, get thee a bedtime unto him, get thee a beat time unto him, and let thy foot wear the steps of his door. So meaning, if you know somebody that's got some wisdom, a man of the Lord that's keeping the laws, you always wear them down with questions. Always, always, always. If you have to be at their house every day, you sit and you learn from them. You try to know what they know. That's the whole point, right? It says, if thou seest a man of understanding, get thee betimes unto him, and let thy foot wear the steps of his door, right? Meaning, always be at that person, house, or wherever they may be, teaching or learning. Always be there to learn, and to feel like you done damaged the property. You done came over so many times. You done left footprints on the stairs, right? Because you've been, keep knocking, asking questions, always wanting to know, right? So, because sometimes people get comfortable in what they perceive to be knowledge or stuff, and they don't want to further grow, or they get embarrassed because they, it might be something that they don't know, and they think they can just learn it on their own, instead of just understanding that we all have to be taught. The Bible says, before you, I'm paraphrasing, before you can be a teacher, you must be taught, right? So it says, let thy mind be upon the ordinance of Yahweh, and meditate continually in his commandments. And that's what we do. We meditate continually on his commandments. We think daily, how could we better ourselves? How could we keep these commandments? What are the commandments? What should we be doing at whatever, point in time, right? And it says, and he shall establish thy heart and give thee wisdom at thy own desire. right? And that's the thing. So he will, like I said, it says, he will establish thy heart and give thee wisdom at thy own desire. So, but you have to seek the wisdom of the Lord, right? And he will give you those hard to know questions that people ask sometimes, right? The deeper, darker sins and the mysteries of this Bible. He'll reveal them to you and break them down to you, right? And give you the proper understanding. But you have to be willing to learn, and you cannot be a know-it-all. You cannot be a person that think, because they read a Bible or went to church a few times or know somebody that go to church, that now that make them an expert, right? That's not how this works. You gotta put in the work and do the study and all that cool stuff. Show yourself approved, right? If you know somebody that's, keeping the laws, statutes, and commandments, a man of the Lord, you get with them and you learn from them, right? That's how this thing works, right? So that's how we build a nation, because each one teach one, right? And we build each other up, right? That's how this thing continues. So I'm going to say shalom. Hopefully that was edifying. We understand that, you got to keep the commandments, law, statutes, and commandments. How to be good friends and how to pick friends, Don't be a gossiper. Don't be somebody that, talk about your friends and family behind their back. Be a person that's in the habit of establishing good relationships and having good conversation that speak life and not death. Be an enjoyable person that people want to be around and not dread and worry to be around. So I'm going to say shalom, peace, all that cool stuff. Hopefully that was edifying. Until next time, we out. We out. Adios, sir.